Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome to episode 8 of Animation Super Basics. In this episode, we're going to be covering expressions. We're going to go through a couple pretty simple ones, and we're going to do one complex one. So let's take a look at what we're going to be creating today. Alright, so we have this animated car, and we have rotation in the tires. We have the car bouncing up and down and rocking back and forth. And then we have also this exhaust coming out. Now, there are actually very few keyframes. The tires and the car body, no keyframes whatsoever. The exhaust, just a few. Alright, so there's a lot to get through, so let's get started. Okay, so to get started, we're going to go into our assets folder here. We're going to select the car and the tire, and we're going to bring that down into a new composition. Now, over here, we want to set this to single composition. Dimensions from, it doesn't really matter. Both these are the same size. 10 seconds is fine. Sequence layers, we want to leave that off. Otherwise, it'll do like put the car first, and then that will stop, and then the tire will go. We want them both right underneath each other. So sequence layers off, and let's hit OK. Now let's select our tire, and let's move that right to about where we want it. So right there. All right, so let's hit S to bring up the scale, and we're just going to scale it down to size. Maybe move it down. There we go. All right, so now let's duplicate this. Take our second tire, click on it, hold down Shift, and slide it over to this side. There we go. We have our car built. All right, so our first tire here, we're going to hit R on the keyboard to bring up the rotation. Now, normally what we could do is set a keyframe and then just, go like that. And now our car tire is rotating. We're going to do it different. I'm going to set this to 0. All right, so we're going to Alt-click on the stopwatch, and we're going to type in time times, and we'll do 200. Semicolon. You don't need the semicolon there. I just like putting it. All right, so now let's take a look at this. All right, our tire is rotating by itself without any keyframes. Simple, right? Now, if you were to imagine that the road was down here, our point of contact would be here. This tire is rotating this way, meaning the force is being pushed off this way from the ground. In other words, the car is going in reverse. To fix that, super simple. Just add a minus sign in front of your 200. Now it will rotate the opposite direction. Now, I'm going to take this, I'm going to copy it, Command C, open up the rotation on our second tire, Alt-click on the stopwatch, and just paste that in there. Now, they're rotating at the same speed. All right, so to demonstrate what's going on here, I'm going to right-click on this top tire here. And I'm going to go to Pre-compose, and we're going to leave all attributes. All right, now we're going to go into our tire, and we're going to add a quick little line here. Maybe we can move this over more towards the center. There we go. That's fine. So we go back to our car. We go to the first frame. Our line's at the top. Now if we go to 1 second, you will see that we are at minus 200 degrees. So this number is, over time, this value is going to change negative 200 times a second. All right, so let's delete this comp right here, and let's just duplicate our tire again, and Shift, drag it over. There we go. All right, so now for our car, we're going to get slightly more complicated. We're going to hit P, and we're going to hit R. For the position, we're going to right-click and go to Separate Dimensions. All right, and for our Y position, let's Alt-click on the stopwatch and type in wiggle. This is one of my favorite ones. Wiggle, parentheses, And also, with writing expressions, you want to make sure that the first letter is actually lowercase and not a uppercase or capitalized. So inside our parentheses, we're going to put 3, comma, 7. All right, so let's explain what this is doing. This wiggle is basically a randomization expression. These two numbers, this is the frequency, the first number, and the second number is the value at which it changes. So we have this set to 7, and our position starts at 540. So if we were to subtract 7 from that, 533, and if we were to add 7, 547. So this is going to select any random number between that range of 533 and 547, and 3 times a second that number is going to change. And that will cause the position to appear in random places. All right, so we can also do this to the rotation. So wiggle, parentheses, and we're going to do maybe 2 times a second at, 1 degree. There we go. Now you might say, hey, that's ridiculous. That's completely unrealistic. Well, obviously you've never driven on a road in Pennsylvania, okay? Because our roads are pretty shit. Potholes everywhere. Moving on. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go up to composition. We're going to go to composition settings, and we're going to change the width to 1920 and leave the height at 1080. So now we have a regular sized frame, and we're going to right click and go to new, solid, black solid. It doesn't really matter. Exhaust. All right, very good. So now we're going to go to effects and presets, and we're going to type in fractal noise, and we're going to go to noise and grain, and we're going to add that onto our solid. We're just going to set this to dynamic progressive, transform, bring that down to like maybe there. All right, and evolution. That kind of looks like a rotation slider. I wonder if we can do anything with that. Maybe we can alt-click on that stopwatch, type in time times 250. Look at that. We've animated our fractal noise without any keyframes. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to poke its eye out. We're going to grab our ellipse tool, click, hold down Shift and Command. That way we get a nice little perfect circle. We're going to make it about that big. Unpoke its eye out, and let's just hit F, maybe feather it out a bit, like so. We're going to set the blending mode to none. That just kind of fixes the edges for us here. Oh, by the way, that was Shift Command H to hide and bring up your overlays for your mask and such and layers. We're going to turn that off just so we can see what we're doing. All right, so now we have this little blobby poof thing. We're going to turn this into exhaust. All right, so let's hit P, Shift S, and T to bring up the position, scale, and opacity. All right, let's start with the scale. So this is the first time we're going to create keyframes. We're going to do a keyframe at the beginning, and this is going to be set to 0. Then we're going to go to 1 second, type in 100. So now we have this. So it's scaling out from the center here. We don't want that. So what we do want to do is hit Y on our keyboard, and that'll bring up our pan behind tool. Now if we hit Shift Command H, you're going to see this crosshair here, and our pan behind tool allows us to move that. So we're going to take it and grab it, and we're going to hold down Command, and that will snap it right to the center of our little smoke puff. Now when it scales, it'll scale from the center, and that's exactly what we want. Boo, 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 boo. Let's go a couple frames in and let's set this to 0. Right. That's not very interesting. So what we're going to do is we're going to alt click on the stopwatch and we're going to type loop out. Now, I mentioned that the first letter should always be lowercase. In the first word, in the second word, when there's more than one, you want the first letter of the second word to be capitalized. All right, so we're going to do loop out with a capital O, parentheses. Let's move my mouse out of the way here. And we're going to type equals, and in quotation marks, we're going to put cycle. Now we can click out of that, and let's play this back. What this is doing is the playhead's going to continue to go on, but as it goes on, it's going to read from these keyframes and play this little animation, and then basically start it over again. Now this last keyframe can actually help you control when it starts looping back around. So let's go to like 3 seconds. And you can even put a gap here. Set that to 0. Make sure that's set at 0. And a little gap, and then loop. So you can really control this, and it's actually pretty neat, pretty nifty. All right, let's move this back over here. For opacity, we're gonna click on the stopwatch and set this to 0. Come over to 1 here. Set this to 0. So add another keyframe. And in between, we're going to do 100. So now we have this, it kind of just fades in and then quickly fades out. You know, you can adjust where the middle of it is. You can even add another keyframe in here at 100. So we're just going to select this text here, copy it. We're going to alt click on the stopwatch for the opacity, and we're going to paste that in there. And we're going to add another keyframe right underneath this guy, because we want this whole animation to be in sync with each other. So we're going to add another keyframe at 0. Make sure that is 0. There we go. I'm going to get rid of this guy right here. I kind of like the slow fade and then quick fall off there. So now our position. Let's click on the stopwatch because this is where we want it. Boom. Let's go to our 1 second mark. Make sure we have our move tool selected by hitting V. And we're just going to move this up and out over here. Then we're going to take our little Bezier handles. And we'll just make a little curve. And then we're going to go like a couple frames over. First, let's copy the position for this first keyframe. Just copy that keyframe. And we're going to paste it right in between here. Boom. So now it automatically loops back. And then what we can do was actually add this right there. Now we can select this type again. Alt click on the stopwatch for the position and just paste that in. Maybe let's add that 100 keyframe in there for the opacity. Yeah, that works. That's fine. Maybe fade it out longer. Yeah, there we go. All right, so that's cool, right? So now we're going to get to the complex one, and this is actually going to be the last one. So we're going to make a trail of exhaust here, and we're going to do that by basically duplicating this exhaust and offsetting it. So, I mean, I can just do that right now, right? There you go. Offset. Very good. No. We're going to use expressions. All right, so real quick, I want to hit R on the keyboard to bring up the rotation for our exhaust. And we're going to alt click and we're going to do time times 50. There we go. So now we have some rotation in there as well. So now what we're going to do is we're going to select our exhaust and we're going to pre-compose that. So right click, pre-compose, and we're going to move all attributes, hit OK. All right, so now we're going to duplicate this. All right, so we're going to select both of these. We're going to right click, go to time, enable time remapping. Now for this top one, we're going to alt click on the stopwatch. Now I'm going to go through these and we're going to type in 4 different lines. And we're just going to go through and type them all in. And then I'm going to explain what each line is doing and how it affects our layers. Actually, before we do any of that, we need to create a new, now you can put this on really a text, solid, camera, null object. I don't know about camera actually. Null object, shape layer, any one of these you can choose. Just as long as you can put effects onto them. So we're going to go over here, we're going to type in slider control. So we got our slider control, we're going to add that onto our null. And we're going to rename this by hitting enter and change this to time offset. And that's it. And what we want to do is lock this up so that when we click on another layer, it doesn't disappear. All right, so now back to our exhaust here. So we have this expression already written in. We're just going to click on that and we're going to type in time offset equals. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take this pick whip thing and we're going to connect it to the slider of our time offset. And then we're going to do divided by 29.97, semicolon. All right, so this second number here, that 29.97, that's actually our frame rate. So this number is always going to be the frame rate that you are working in. So that's something you need to pay attention to. All right, so we have our time offset. We're going to hit enter. We're going to type in base time equals, and we're going to take our pick whip, and this time we're going to pick whip it to our time remap on our first exhaust. Not the actual layer, but the actual time remap. And that's it. Semicolon, hit enter. Now we're going to type in my index equals, now we're going to pick whip another time. So we're going to actually connect it to our actual layer and not the time remap this time. So connect it to our first exhaust. We're going to type in dot index minus index. So now for our final line, we're going to create an equation that uses these terms. These first 3 lines were actually defining the terms for our equation. It's telling After Effects where to get the numbers that we need to get to make this animation happen. So the equation is base time. As you can see, it's highlighted, so we can just hit enter. Plus parentheses my index times time offset. And then add a semicolon to the end of that. And that's our equation. So this time offset is based off this slider. And these numbers are moving in increments of frames. So each number is a frame. So +1 is 1 frame. And that's how many frames it's going to be offset by. So let's set that to 1. Now this base time is basically just reading from this number right here. So we move up 1 frame. We're displaying 1 frame, 2 frames, 3, 4, 5, and so on. Now this index, what we're trying to find out is how many of these exhausts are there, because it needs to know how many times it's going to offset this number. So this index is basically going off of these numbers right here, which are the index. So it's taking the index from this one and subtracting the index of this layer. So 3 minus 2 equals 1. There is one copy of this exhaust. If I duplicate this again, this one is 2, this one's 4. 4 minus 2, there are 2 copies. All right, let's undo that duplication there. All right, so what this equation is doing is it's taking the index that we got, so this number would be 1, time offset would be 1 for one frame, so 1 times 1 equals 1. And then we're adding that to the base time. So since you're adding this to the base time, let's see if I set this to 2, you'll notice here, this is at 0, but this is at 2. All right, so all we have to do now is just duplicate this top one with the expression on it. Command D, can duplicate it a bunch of times, we'll do 4. We'll do 4 total copies, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, when we're on a first frame, we don't want any exhaust to be showing. So what we can do is actually do a -2. Actually, let's do -1 here. And let's open up our keyframes by hitting U, which, by the way, if we were to double tap U, we'd bring up our expression. So double tapping U will bring up your expressions and basically anything you've changed inside the layer. Let's select these 4, hit U to bring up just the keyframes so we can just see these numbers. Now, as you can see, all of our frames are set at 0. If I were to move forward 1 frame, this bottom one would be at 1 frame, the rest are at 0. If I were to move 1 more, this one's at 2, this one's at 1, etc., etc., etc. All right, so for this animation, I think -4 works. And there we go. And of course, you can go in to this exhaust comp, open up the keyframes, and you can, nope, don't want to do that. You can select these and hold down Alt and then click, and you can move the keyframes. You can change these keyframes if you want, but it's automatically going to update in your main comp without having to change anything. Now, I think I'm going to get into a little more detail on this expression because there's a lot to unpack inside of it, and I think the information is really important. So double tap U. Nope, double tap U on the one that actually has the expressions. Dummy. All right, so you'll notice this whole line right here, starting with this comp and ending with this parentheses. Now that automatically showed up when we connected our pick whip to the slider. Let's break this down. So basically this whole line is a directory for After Effects. And it's saying that inside of this comp here that we're in currently, we're looking for a layer. And that layer is called null 4. Hey, that's that guy right here. On that null, there's going to be an effect, hey, called time offset. Boom, right there. And on that effect, we're going to be taking a look at the slider, and that's right there. So it's directing you here. Now, if we were to take this null and pre-compose it, moving all attributes, our expression is suddenly broken. Layer named null4 is missing or does not exist. It may have been renamed, removed, or deleted. Or you might have mistyped it. By the way, that last one can happen a lot, so make sure when you're typing in things to use proper spelling. All right, so we can double click into our null comp, and let's lock this guy up here. So what we're going to do is we can just take this whole line here, select it, and highlight it, and just put it back to the slider, and that'll automatically update. So now it's saying we want to look in the composition called null4, so on. Now you notice there are still errors, and that's our duplicates here, because we still have this connected to these comps. All we have to do, take them, delete them, and then take the one that we edited and just duplicate them again. Now everything is all set up. All right, that last one was really complex, and but I hope that you have a better understanding of what all this nonsense means. All right, so this has been Animation Super Basics, episode 8. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.
Check it.